Hare Krishna, very dear devotees. Welcome back once again to our ever ongoing series on the glories of our beloved Sri Vrindavan Dham. We had a little break in the recent series, because we were at the Sadhu Sangha retreat in America, Kirtan retreat. It was really blissful. But now we're back in action. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So we are continuing with our series on historical Vrindavan. This is part 4. We've been discussing the contributions of royal families in particular in building very beautiful temples and shrines in Braj over the past several hundred years that contribute to the appeal and the charisma of present-day Vrindavan. We have already mentioned several members of such prestigious families, a king and 2 queens who, by their inspiration, 3 beautiful temples were constructed. We must also remember an emperor who contributed. Emperor means king of kings, and that would be Emperor Akbar. I'm sure you remember how he contributed generously to the construction of the temple of Govindaji for Rupa Goswami's deity. So even an emperor is involved. I was reading that historically, after such temples started appearing in Vrindavan, many kings and queens of various states in India started coming to Vrindavan after hearing about its glories. And they, in turn, built for themselves in Vrindavan Havelis. Remember, we discussed Havelis. Haveli is a house, but built to look like a small temple, because the royal families would have their family deities installed there. And this is one reason there's 5,000 temples in Vrindavan. An interesting note here is that previously, where these temples and Havelis were built, previously there were kunjas, or groves, on those spots where Radha and Krishna had their pastimes. There's kunjas all over Vrindavan. So the custom was that these royal families referred to their Havelis and to their temples by the names of the kunjas that were previously there. Actually, many of the old temple documents present in the Vrindavan Research Institute that I've seen are written with reference to the original kunja name of the temple, not the temple. It's really interesting. Like, for example, the Radha Damodar temple of our beloved Srila Jiva Goswami. In old Vrindavan documents, the original name ascribed to that temple is Jyogosai Kika Kunj. Jyogosai Jika Kunj, meaning the grove of, or the kunj of Jiva Goswami. And there were many such kunjas or groves. Seva Kunj, today one of the most popular holy sites in Vrindavan, was the large, I guess you could even say is the largest kunja or grove in Vrindavan proper. And in the old days I was reading, it was shared by 2 sampradayas. This is just interesting historic information. Half of it, which was on the banks of the Jamuna, was under the custodianship of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, and the other half was under the custodianship of the Radha Vallabha Sampradaya. And an interesting thing is that just adjacent to Seva Kunj is a small grove called Kishoravana, like a little forest, Kishoravana, which, and you'll find this really surprising, is actually inside Loy Bazaar, where many devotees go shopping, Loy Bazaar. That little forest, actually that little kunj, still exists on one very narrow street in Loy Bazaar. You can go there and try to find it. And the boundary of Seva Kunj and Kishoravan is known as Acharya Juko Kunj. Acharya Juko Kunj, meaning the kunj or the grove of Advaita Acharya. This is a place where Advaita Acharya did bhajan during his time in Vrindavan. I was reading, actually Advaitacharya did bhajan in 3 particular places. Advaitavat, or the banyan tree, which is very near Madan Mohan's temple. Acharya Ju Kunj, which we just mentioned, which is the border between Kishirovana and Sevakunj. And he also went to Niduvan, the forest which, if you look at a map, is next to Radharaman, Niduvan. So these 3 places he did his bhajan. And because of that, these 3 places were very dear to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as well, because he came after Advaitacharya. And during Mahaprabhu's visit to Vrindavan, he took rest in all these 3 places where Advaitacharya did bhajan. And it's written that while doing so, he remembered Advaitacharya. Now these 3 places actually, because I was looking at a map, these 3 places, which I mentioned, make a triangle in Vrindavan. And lo and behold, in the middle of the triangle is the temple of Gopishwara Mahadev, Lord Shiva, in the mood of a gopi. So this triangle, on the maps, it's referred to as Acharya Tikona. Acharya Tikona, meaning the triangle kingdom of Advaitacharya. And as we all know, Advaitacharya is also Sadashiva, which explains the presence of Gopishwara Mahadev in the middle of the triangle. Now, many other well-known and beautiful constructed old buildings, temples, etc., were known by Kunja names as well. For example, the place where the security guards sent by Emperor Akbar to protect Rupa Goswami's Govindaji temple, that particular place was known as Fauzdar Kunj. Fauzdar Kunj, meaning, Fauzdar means the army of security guards. So it's a kunj where there's an army of security guards protecting Govindaji. And Srila Sanatana Goswami's temple, Radha Madan Mohan, in the old documents it's known as Bado Kunj. Bado Kunj, meaning the big grove. And I had to research more about the big grove. It's called the big grove because Sanatana Goswami was the big brother of Rupa Goswami. Therefore his place was famous as Bado Kunj, meaning the big brother grove, like that. It's really interesting. And the temple and the place of worship of our beloved Shri Shri Radharaman was famous as Dol Kunj, the grove of the swing pastime, because Dol is a place where Radha and Krishna swing. It means a swing. So the temple and the place of worship of Radharaman, they said, let's go to the Dol Kunj, which means let's go see Radharaman, the grove of the swing pastime. And to this day, actually I was just down there recently, there's an old white marble swing near the Samadhi of Srila Gopal Bhatta Goswami. Now, the temple of Radha Gokulananda and its nearby area is still referred to as Patni Mal Kunj. Patni Mal Kunj. So you see, in the old days they just referred to the kunjas. And I read that Keshi Ghat was not called Keshi Ghat in the old days. It was called Keshi Vadashtal. Keshi Vadashtal. And only later, when the kings came and they made these beautiful ghats there, did it become known as Keshi Ghat. Oh yeah, and there's the famous temple of Govindaji, the temple itself, and its surrounding area, that's known as Gosai Ji Ko Kunj in the old documents. Gosai Ji Ko Kunj, meaning the place of the Goswami, Rupa Goswami. Gosai is a word which is famously used, especially for Sri Rupa Goswami, here in our beloved Vrindavan. And there, previously, at that temple, I was reading that Srila Gopal Bhatta Goswami would do theatrical productions of 3 of Rupa Goswami's books, Vigdagda Madhav, Lalita Madhav, and Dan Keli Kumodi. He was I was reading he was actually a very good actor, Gopal Bhatta Goswami. He liked to do theater. So he would perform these theatrical productions at that kunj, at that temple of Rupa Goswami. And during that time also, as we mentioned last year, there were regular discourses on Srimad Bhagavatam by Srila Raghunath Bhatt Goswami. I was also reading that next to Govindaji's temple, there was once a beautiful, beautiful manicured garden of banana trees, meant expressly for Govindaji, and it was known as Kadli Kunj, the grove of banana trees. Lots of kunjas. Just near Govindaji there was a banana grove, Kadli Kunj, the grove of banana trees. There was also a well-known large Goshala for Govindaji's cows, just nearby. We can still see the present temple, but the Goshala is not there any longer because unfortunately it was destroyed by the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. Such an evil person. Now I want to make an important point here that in reference to the temples being referred to as kunjas, this was also in part because the Goswamis, or let us say the pujaris, serving Radha and Krishna in those temples, were not thinking they were serving in a construction made of sand and stone, like a building, a temple, but rather they were imagining themselves serving in the kunj, the flowery kunj with the flowers and the bushes and the trees and where Radha and Krishna's pastimes took place. They were actually thinking, oh, I'm not serving in a temple, I'm serving in a kunj. So nice, so sweet, so relevant for Braja Bhakti. Now, unfortunately, we had to mention the name of the Mughal Emperor, Aurangzeb, in relationship to his destroying, Govindaji's Goshala. But that reminded me of a very interesting twist in history regarding that terrible tyrant, Aurangzeb, that I thought I would share with you today. It's the story of Zeb-un-Nisha. Zeb-un-Nisha. She was the eldest daughter of Aurangzeb, his first child. And this story is about how she was influenced by Gaudiya Vaishnava teachings and became a Vaishnavi. I couldn't help but tell the story. A number of historians will deny this, especially our dear Islamic brothers and sisters. They'll deny this. They're saying it wouldn't be possible that the daughter of a powerful ruler in the Mughal dynasty, like Aurangzeb, would have a daughter who converted to Vaishnavism. And they've written much about her without mentioning her being influenced or affected by our Gaudiya Vaishnava culture. But nevertheless, her story was chronicled by devotee scholars, Gaudiya Vaishnava scholars at the time. And thus her glorious, but I have to add sad history, as you will see, remains known to all of us. Now, much of the material that I will share with you about this illustrious personality is from a number of books. One's called Divan-i-Makav, originally written in Persian and published by the Lahore Amrit Press. There's also another book I read called Zeb-un-Nisha by Paul Wali, written in 1913 in the context I'm going to describe, as well as a book called The Tears of Zeb-un-Nisha, excerpts from the Divan-i-Makav by W. Tak. So some scholars have written in this regard. So, let me begin. Zeb-un-Nisha was born February 15th in the year 1638, again as the first child of Aurangzeb. Her mother's name was Dilras Bhanu Begum. Dilras Bandhu Begum. And she was actually the main queen of Aurangzeb. Now, this Zeb-un-Nisha, as she grew up, she was very, very beautiful, and she was extremely intelligent and cultured. It's written that as a young girl, she actually memorized the entire Quran in 3 years. And in her teenage years, she studied philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, literature. She also mastered Persian, Arabic, and Urdu languages. And I was reading her, in her personal library surpassed all other private collections. And she employed many scholars to produce literary works for her. And her library had literary works on law, let's see, I remember, law, literature, history, and most important, theology. Theology. It's written that in her theological studies, she came across the writings of Srila Rupa Goswami, which, as anyone can imagine, had a very profound effect on her, but which she kept secret for obvious reasons because she's in a Mughal dynasty. But once that seed is planted, nothing can stop it from growing, except offenses, of course. So I was reading that Zeb-un-Nisha was a very kind-hearted person. She was always helping people in need. She had a very keen interest in music, and actually she was said to be the best singer amongst the women of her time. Interestingly, she never married, but at one point in her life, she fell in love with get this, a Rajput king named Maharaj Chhatrasal. Because in those days, there was a lot of mixing between the Mughal dynasty and the Rajput kings. There were treaties between them, so they didn't have to fight and destroy their kingdoms. There was intermarriage, etc. I've discussed that before. So for whatever reason, she saw this personality, she heard from him, from a distance obviously, but she fell in love with a Rajput king, Aurangzeb's daughter. Again, his name was Maharaj Chhatrasal. Unfortunately, Maharaj Chhatrasal was not initially interested in Zeb-un-Nisha's, because she was a Muslim. Didn't want to complicate things, so he wasn't very interested in her. What's more, Maharaj Chhatrasal happened to be Aurangzeb's biggest enemy. There was no kind words between these two. There was no alliances in this particular relationship. They just fought battle after battle after battle. And Maharaj Chhatrasal, he always won. So you can see the plot developing here. So intent on actually making contact with Maharaj Chhatrasal, Zeb-un-Nisha began secretly writing him many letters, which he basically ignored. But as her secret love, remember, her secret love for Krishna was also blossoming at the same time, she started privately composing and singing very beautiful poetry about Krishna and Braj in Farsi and Urdu languages, which she would share in secret letters with Maharaj Chhatrasal. Somehow she had her spies or her messengers going to Rajasthan and delivering these love letters. Love letters about Krishna, but also obviously she wanted to entertain this Rajput king. But it's written that although Maharaj Chhatrasal began to appreciate her devotion for Krishna, and why would he appreciate? Because it's also described he was a great devotee of Krishna as well. He was a great devotee of Krishna. Many of these Rajput kings were great devotees of Krishna. So, he's hearing these poems she's writing and these songs, and It's kind of touching his heart. But he continued to hesitate to contact her for obvious reasons. So finally, this princess, in desperation, she disguised herself as an actor who sang devotional songs about Krishna in Vrindavan. And she secretly traveled to the court of Maharaj Chatrasal, and she performed there. And it's written that when Maharaj Chatrasal heard her singing her beautiful voice, again, remember she's the moon amongst the stars of the ladies who sung in those days. When she sang, it touched his heart, especially what she was singing about Radha and Krishna. And when he inquired who was this new girl, a relationship started developing with Krishna at the center, as we say today. With Krishna at the center, as we say today. To make a long story short, their love affair was discovered by Aurangzeb's spies, and when Aurangzeb was informed that his beloved daughter, his firstborn, was in a relationship with his worst enemy, he became like fire. Anger consumed everything, including his whatever intelligence he may have had. He became very angry with her. Actually, I was reading he beat her. But rather than publicly humiliate Zeb-un-Nisha by revealing her love affair with his greatest enemy, and thus, you could say, like tarnish his own reputation, what he did is he threw his favorite daughter, previously his firstborn child, Zeb-un-Nisha, into a dark, damp prison. It was in the Salimgarh fort in Delhi. There's several forts in Delhi. So the Salimgarh fort in Delhi. He threw her into that damp, dark prison. I was reading it had just a earthen floor, no windows. But being the devotee that she became, after reading the writings of Rupa Goswami, she continued her writing and her poetry, glorifying her beloved, Radha and Krishna. It is said that when she received the news that her father, Aurangzeb, had destroyed the birthplace temple of Krishna in Mathura, which he did, it broke her heart. And from that day, her health started deteriorating. So you can see how attached she was to Krishna, to Radha and Krishna. But somehow she survived these austere conditions in the prison for more than 20 years. More than 20 years. And Aurangzeb never came to see her, of course. She just rotted in prison. And it's written that when she took her final breath, on the 26th of May, 1702, she was 64 years of age, her final breath was singing for Krishna, and it's written, dreaming to take her next birth in Sri Vrindavan Dham. She was singing about Krishna and dreaming that I will now take birth in Vrindavan and be a Brajabasi in my next life. And her samadhi, because she was a princess, so there had to be something, her samadhi is in Agra near one of the forts. I was actually thinking of going there and paying my respects to this great Vaisnavi. Hare Krishna. Isn't that a wonderful story? So I would like to finish today with an excerpt from one of her early poems. You know, when her love's just awakening for Krishna after reading Rupa Goswami's writings, where she is clearly revealing her love for Krishna. Here it is. Oh, you with dark curly hair and breathtaking eyes, your sidelong glance leaves me undone. Oh, you with eyes that pierce my heart and then withdraw like a blood-stained sword. Oh, you with eyes with dagger lashes eyelashes. Oh, unbelievers, you are mistaken. This is in fact heaven. Never mind those making promises of the afterlife. Join us now, righteous friends, in this intoxication of divine love. Never mind the path to the holy temple for today. Sanctity resides in the pure heart. Don't squander your life, my friends. God is right here. Just come see His beautiful face. See its continual light. This is where I belong. I am thrilled here, right here. There is no book anywhere to properly describe His beauty. Only when I see Him do I understand. My friends, if you wish to see the beauty of God, share it with me. Awaiting the tiniest morsel, I am here waiting for you. Hare Krishna. She's already so enlightened, but she's begging her friends to come with some morsel of mercy from Krishna. Wow. We'll finish here. We'll be back in a couple of days after I unpack and put all my things away after coming back from America. We'll be back in a couple of days with more beautiful history of our beloved Shri Vrindavan Dham. I can tell you it's so nice to be back. And we're waiting for many of you to come for Kartik. Hare Krishna. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani ki, Shri Mayapur Dham ki, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Krishna Sankirtan Yagya ki, Transcendental Book Distribution ki, the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra in every town and village ki, all glories to Shri Prabhupada, back home, back to Godhead ki, Nitai Gaur Pimanandi, Jai Jai Sri Sri Radhe.